And welcome back. Joining us on our couch for our second conversations are representatives from the Ministry of Agriculture and BAHA. On our couch, we have the CEO, Mr. Jose Alpuche. We have Mr. Silverio Marin, who is the Interim Administrator at BMDC. And we have the Managing Director of BAHA, Mr. Emir Cruz. Good morning, gentlemen. Welcome to Open Your Eyes.
Pleasant good morning. Thank you for having us.
Okay. So we're going to just start off a little bit about the early developments of what's happening from coming out of the ministry. You know, we've just come out of Hurricane Earl from a few months ago, and you know, there's been different strides to really help persons within the sector to recover from that travesty. So tell us a bit about that update.
Thank you very much. Indeed, you will recall earlier this year the figures in agriculture had looked rather bleak.
Yeah.
But as we had said after Earl, the sector had sustained $73 million worth of losses, direct losses, and that production would be down. But we had said that bananas would recover fairly quickly, and that the other sectors would increase. I think what's been shown from the last SIB quarterly is that indeed that recovery is occurring. Of course, we have the wider issue of the impact of EMS on shrimp, again, which is something that has taken out quite a substantial chunk out of the productive sector. But as you can see from the figures, we do have a fairly stable sector otherwise, and in certain cases, continuous growth in livestock and in other areas occurring in the sector.
Yeah, okay.
When we look at the recent figures released by the Statistical Institute, in the area of citrus, it seems to still be behind, at least for this last quarter. Is there any attributable reasons for that?
Unfortunately, the decline from citrus continues. As you know, when you replant with citrus, it's a 4 or 5 year cycle before you begin recovering and increasing output. We expect that hopefully in the next crop cycle, we will see some increases because plantings that went in 4 or 5 years ago will now begin yielding produce. Keep in mind too that citrus was impacted by Earl also. So the production figures are down. Orange is down, grapefruit is way down, but the income from the sector has remained more or less stable. Actually, it has increased a little over 2016 because prices are so high on the world market.
And what can be said for banana? I know that a year or so ago, the state of the banana industry was sort of in turmoil, for want of a better word.
Bananas, several issues affecting the sector. One was the exit of Marin, but I think we've established that government did all it can to try to push for a revival of that, but it's a private sector issue with the U.S. government. Beyond that was Hurricane Earl, but you will see the numbers that they have recovered fairly well. Of course, with bananas, as with sugar and other areas, we have the looming issues of Brexit and what the market will yield post-Brexit. But bananas is performing fairly well. We have issues that we will continue to deal with directly with the industry. Sugar, on the other hand, has performed very well this crop cycle. The northern sugar sector produced record yields. I think it's 144,000 tons of sugar. The TCTS, the conversion of cane to sugar cane, it's one of the best. Also, to the western or central sugar production has increased dramatically. So for sugar, we're doing fairly well. We have some substantial issues in the sector that I'd want to cover a little bit more in depth. But overall, the yield towards increased competitiveness we're achieving quite a bit. but there's still quite a bit of scope to do in terms of improvement, in terms of reform on the administration and operation of the sector.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. Silverio, can you talk to us a little bit about how the sector has improved in terms of encouraging small business owners and even the larger companies to really work towards that spirit of competitiveness and growth and innovation within their own companies?
Well, what I can say is that the government has looked at ways in trying to make the small producers more competitive within the local market and even internationally. There has been a policy instituted recently where the duties have been removed for many of the packaging or materials, as this is one of the major challenges for the small producers.
So talk to us about some of the other challenges, because I know that with small producers especially, there are so many of them, and it's hard to kind of sometimes distinguish yourself and really ensure that you have your steady and consistent customer base. So talk to us about some of the other challenges that they have and how the ministry is working along with them to combat those challenges.
Well, the challenges for the small producers, the cottage industry, are vast.
Yeah.
One of the main ones is access to materials, to inputs, especially in terms of packaging and making your product presentable. This is where we are also playing a role, and we are assisting the small producers in bettering the presentation of their products. We do a branding program where we allow the producers to come in. We do market studies, we do competitive studies, and then we also assist in the development of brands, in the development of labels, and as such we create a better presentation for the local market.
So if we look at an example, for instance, the coconut oil industry, for instance, right, where you have the small business owners are in this particular area of the sector, but when it comes to their ability to be able to bottle their goods, for instance, because they want to have it on the shelf, prominently displayed at the supermarket, but they may not have in the past had access to the resources necessary for them to understand how important packaging is as equally as important, in my opinion, as the product itself. So now you're saying essentially that the BMDC is in that position now to be able to help these individuals to be able to better market and advertise their products.
That is right. We look at the product, we do an evaluation of all the products that we receive, and thereafter we look at what are the needs and the ability for us to assist. We also work with other development partners such as SBDC and the cooperatives department, and then we channel some of these challenges that we cannot assist them with. We then channel it to these other entities.
And the Belize shop too, if I could add to what Silverio is saying, is also pushing we're also pushing the Belize shop, which is to give direct access to the producer. They deal more with, at this point in time, with processed product, shelf-stable product. And the Belize shop will provide a venue for them to sell directly. He takes goods on consignment. Another initiative that and I'll take the opportunity to announce it, on the 29th of July, we'll have our first Farmers Market Day at the National Agriculture and Trade Show grounds. We've been working on this for quite some time to give the farmers and, of course, the producers through BMDC a direct access to the consumers, so that they get the full benefits of their the earnings. This should go quite a long way in helping small farmers, but as well as small entrepreneurs get a direct access to the market. It's a pilot we're running right now, and subsequent to the full establishment of the market there, we will roll it out elsewhere in the country.
Mr. Cruz, do you want to come in and speak about the role that BAHA is playing in terms of keeping the producers accountable for the standards regarding health and safety and all of that aspect of the production?
Sure. The support that we give is in different forms. We have the plant health department that can help farmers, the producers, right, with information on good agricultural practices and so on. We also have a food safety department that can assist, so that whatever is produced for the Belizean and sold to the Belizean public is wholesome and safe to eat.
Yeah.
So we normally engage them in that. Currently, Silverio spoke about the small producers, the small entrepreneurs, but the assistance is given also at all levels. And we have the medium-sized facilities, like the quality poultry, Caribbean chicken, etc., who, with assistance and guidance, of course, with their own investment and initiative, are now HACCP certified.
Yeah.
I think you've heard that it's been made public. We, in the past year, we've had Running W, Western Dairies, Quality Poultry, and very soon we'll have 2 other establishments. So with our target of having 5 facilities in Belize, HACCP certified, I think will be achieved between now and probably the end of the summer, August, September, the latest. But basically what we have now is that we're guaranteeing to the Belizean public that what these facilities are producing are safe to eat, and the additional advantage of that is market access. Like the CEO has spoken about that, Silvia, that now, apart from Belize being a market, the whole world becomes your market. But we can use these as standards that allow you to put your feet in other markets across the region and the world.
Can you speak to that gap, CEO? Because I feel that we had Mr. Perez on just now, and he mentioned a very salient point, that the fact that Belize is so huge, we have a very small population, but the amount that we import is exceeds the amount that we export, and we have the region in terms of the Caribbean and Latin and Central America, and we just can't seem to get it right when it comes to the pushing out of our bananas and our rice and our beans and our chicken right here in our own backyard. Where do you think the gap exists?
I believe from I got into the ministry, we've been pushing the mantra of quality, consistency of supply, and competitive pricing. Without that, you can't get anywhere. If you don't conquer that, you can't even fight the contraband, because the issue with the contraband is a question of price difference and economic opportunity therein. So if we can conquer those 3 issues, we can make it anywhere. And I don't think we're sitting still in terms of the sector. To the contrary, I think we've had the second export of ice cream to Grenada about 2 or 3 weeks ago. As Mr. Cruz mentioned, we're pushing, and it now requires a decision from COTED, but pretty soon we'll be in a position to export chicken into the region. Cattle, after $12+ million worth of investment in the sweep, and so we have literally revalued the industry. The price paid is more than twice what it was pre-sweep, and we're exporting. We have legal means to export both into Mexico and Guatemala. So we're changing the face of the sector. There's a lot of work to be done, because you don't go, and it's a systemic issue, to answer your question. HACCP certification requires, in many cases, the reorganization or actually rebuilding of a plant. We're trying to start from the very beginning by pushing increased food safety and food standards and plant certification, so that you go growing gradually. What has happened in the past, things happen, and at the last minute, you realize that you need HACCP certification, and then you need to go and find $6 or $8 million to redo your plant. That's not the best way to go about it. So we're trying to do it on a far more systemic basis from the very beginning, so that as you start as a small enterprise, and that's where the linkage is so key between the ministry, between BAHA as it relates to food safety and certification, between BMDC as it relates to get the people out market exposure from the domestic, when you're still a small cottage industry, begin to understand that these are the standards you have to meet. It will make the transition to exporting far easier.
And what are some of the recommendations as it relates to the products that are more easily ship up? They're more shippable.
Well, again, the issue is always a question of certification of food quality standards. But it's not only the quality of the product; it's the quality of your processing facility. And that's what HACCP certification is all about. Your facility has to reach a certain standards. both in terms of the physical, but in terms of the operational, ensuring that the human element, the chances of human error is actually taken out in terms of food production. The whole issue of traceability all the way back to the farm.
Yeah.
So it's a complete, the food sector has changed globally significantly over the last 2 decades. It's no longer let's produce and send.
Yeah.
You have to be able to literally trace that product from the plate all the way back to the farm. And so we're building that infrastructure, putting quite a bit of investment to build those structures. We have it for livestock. We will do it for sheep. We'll do it for honey. We're doing quite a few areas that actually we will need that base. We need that support structure to ensure that at a hopefully close future date they can export.
Are there any? Sorry, go ahead.
I guess just to add to that, under the leadership of the CEO, we have begun to engage the small entrepreneurs from the onset. To begin, of course, when you're small, you cannot practice, you cannot be HACCP certified, but you can begin to understand and practice standard sanitary operating procedures. You begin to practice good manufacturing practices, good agricultural practice, and eventually, develop as your industry develops, as your enterprise develops. Then you have more resources to begin to put additional structures in place. And whenever you become a quality poultry or a Caribbean chicken, then it's much easier. He spoke about these companies eventually finding millions of dollars because they have to pretty much break rooms and rebuild them again because they would never meet certification. So that's the kind of engagement that now under the leadership of the ministry we're beginning to have with the small entrepreneurs.
As it relates to our relationship with the region, and I know that through the CSME there has been an openness in terms of trade. Has there been any consultations regarding what are some necessary products within the region that can be sourced from Belize? I know that we import a lot from the Caribbean, but when you go to Barbados, you see maybe a coconut oil here or there from Belize. Is there any consultations to determine those kinds of products?
Very much so. We have a close linkage with the Ministry of Trade, Beltrade and others. And quite frankly, for example, with the export of chicken, the Ministry of Agriculture cannot do it alone. We absolutely need the full collaboration and cooperation of the Ministry of Trade to ensure that we articulate what's out there in the marketplace. There are literally endless possibilities, both in CARICOM and in Central America. What we find is that a lot of primary production, grains, etc., going into Central America, where we have a PSA with Guatemala. You have major investments going in specifically to produce, and I'll give you an example, specifically to produce corn for Frito-Lay in Guatemala, because the quality of corn that we produce, they get better yields than what they do when they import from the US. So there are a number of areas where we can expand. And give us a few more months and you will start to see quite a bit more of it beginning to fall in place. The private sector, it's not government, it's government-led, we facilitate. It's the private sector that needs to invest. It's the private sector that we're trying to encourage and engender the confidence that they have, the ministry, that they have BMDC, BAHA, Ministry of Trade, and the rest of government to facilitate what they need to do in terms of accessing new markets.
How has that been? I would want to think that there are some challenges in terms of being able to stimulate, if I may, the private sector to make these kinds of investments.
Yes and no, in the sense that the true challenge is to try to get the smaller entrepreneurs up to a level where they can begin, where they can visualize the step and the stairs that they need to climb to export certification. That one is a perennial challenge, and that one takes quite a bit of effort. However, larger enterprises have already been exposed and they have the ambition to export. And this is what has led Quality Poultry and others. But keep in mind, those investments started quite a few years ago. It is not an overnight thing. It's something that requires a very clear-cut strategy. And we believe that with the meat sector, we have a lot more ground to cover as it relates to agro-processing. And I'll say it openly, it's a weakness that the ministry has that we're trying to fill the gap right now. To be able to give, from all that is being produced domestically, pick the winners that we could help pull up fairly quickly. But the prospects are there.
Talk to us a little bit about I know that you said that the ministry is a facilitator, which is obviously the standard, but talk to us a little bit about the capacity building and the development of the private sector that the ministry is willing to engage in.
I will do this a little bit of a tangential discussion, but poultry, for example, has a Belize Poultry Association, which is run by about 5 people, and they run a $115 million industry. Fairly straightforward. We collaborate very closely with BMDC, with BAHA and others to ensure that the biosecurity and the food safety is there.
Yep.
Sugar, on the other hand, has 7 different entities attempting to administer an industry which is $100+ million. And certainly there's a tremendous need for reform and consolidation to make them fundamentally competitive. And those are some of the areas that we really need to pay keen attention on. If we push to increase quality is only the first bit of it. The other element of it is the competitiveness, because you have to compete. The minute you go, you have to compete domestically, because if you don't produce competitively domestically, the contraband will come in.
Yeah.
You have to produce competitively to export, because you're out there fighting for marketplace with the rest of the world. We do have some scope in the EU and in CARICOM and the likes of Guatemala, where we have a PSA, but we still have to compete. Quality, consistency, supply, competitiveness. The reform, as I said, that is required has to be strictly based on your ability to compete. We have reducing preferences. Well, we've already, the preference reduction has occurred already in the EU. It may very well happen even deeper as it relates to Brexit and what the British decide to do as it relates to allowing others on their market. So we have to start looking at alternatives. And again, I come back to sugar. It's absolutely key. The numbers right now showing a very good outturn for this crop, but it is good, but it is not enough to face the competition that we have increasing. So they have to absolutely consolidate, ensure that the farmers that are true farmers are actually enjoying the benefits of the marketplace. The same thing we're trying to do with the market to get the farmer as close to the marketplace. The same thing must be done as it relates to sugar to make them more competitive.
I can recall a few months ago, we sat on this very same couch with individuals from the Ministry of Agriculture who were presenting onions as an alternative in the north, in respect of, for instance, the idea that in the months ahead, the local sugar industry won't have the kind of preferential access it has insofar as the European market. And with the introduction of beet sugar beating out the competition here, so to speak, they would need to look for alternative ways of being able to continue in the agro-productive sector. Can you speak to some of that?
Well, there are a number of diversification initiatives that we have ongoing up north. Onion, we're trying to assist the industry. We've been assisting the industry for about 15 years, but I'll be very open and probably a little bit blunt. The farmers have to do their part in terms of improving the quality too. We've built storage facilities, drying facilities for them, but you still get green onions on the market. So they have to do their bit to ensure that the Belizean consumers will become steady customers. Onions is one. We have sheep, as it relates to livestock. We have honey. And we're doing several other initiatives. We're about, hopefully, early next year, start a program with the International Fund for Agricultural Development to help these small farmers expand both what they're doing in terms of what they're already producing, but also to into new products. The other area where, as I said earlier, we need to develop additional capacity to assist is in the value addition, a step up in terms of processing the food.
Right. Well, I think this has been quite an informative conversation. I really think that as it relates to our development, I think there are so many possibilities and potential for our growth in terms of manufacturing and export. I thank you so much for being here and offering this information. I don't know if you have any final...
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you too. Thanks for the opportunity.
No problem.
Well, we are going to take a really quick break, and when we come back, it's to talk about World Population Day. So stay tuned.